Commander Zex-Hi stood on the command deck of Defense Station Omega-7 and felt proud. His massive frame cast a long shadow across the metal floor. His thick, armored skin gleamed under the bright lights. Every movement showed the power of a true Korthani warrior. Zex-Hi was 8 feet tall and built like a walking tank. His people, the Korthani, were the strongest fighters in the galaxy. Their homeworld was a place of constant war and brutal training. Every Korthani child learned to fight before they could walk properly. Zex-Hi had never lost a battle in 30 years of service. The other species in the Galactic Council were weak. The bird-like Vellani were too small and fragile. The insect Threx were smart but cowardly. The plant-based Silori moved too slowly. All of them needed Korthani protection to survive in the dangerous galaxy. Today, Zex-Hi commanded the defense of this outer rim station. It was an important position that guarded 3 star systems. The Council trusted only the Korthani with such responsibility. Zex-Hi had 50 of his best warriors with him. Each one was a veteran of countless battles. The station's alarm suddenly began to sound. Red lights flashed everywhere. Zex-Hi's communications officer, a nervous Vellani named Chirp-Click, rushed to his side. "Commander," Chirp-Click said in his high voice, "we have emergency signals from the outer sensors. Something big is coming." Zex-Hi looked at the main display screen. The readings showed massive energy signatures moving toward their position. The computers counted over 2,000 ships approaching at high speed. Zex-Hi felt a small chill run down his spine, but he pushed it away. "Identify the threat," Zex-Hi ordered. Chirp-Click's feathers turned pale as he read the data. "Commander, it's a Void Swarm fleet. The sensors show it's 3 times larger than any recorded attack." The entire command center became quiet. Everyone knew about the Void Swarm. They were ancient machine entities that consumed entire planets. Their ships were dark and moved like living creatures. No one knew where they came from or what they wanted. They just appeared, destroyed everything, and disappeared again. The last Void Swarm attack had destroyed an entire star system 5 years ago. The Council sent their best fleets to fight them. Only 1 in 10 ships returned home. The survivors told horrible stories of weapons that could not be stopped and ships that seemed to think and learn. Zex-Hi opened a communication channel to the Galactic Council. High Admiral Kestar, a dignified Silori, appeared on the screen. His bark-like skin showed deep worry lines. "Commander Zex-Hi," the Admiral said slowly, "we have detected the swarm movement. A defense fleet is being assembled. You must hold the station until they arrive." "How long until the fleet reaches us?" Zex-Hi asked. 18 hours minimum, Kestar replied. "The swarm will arrive in 6 hours. You must delay them as long as possible." Zex-Hi nodded. "My warriors and I will not let you down, Admiral. The station will stand." "Commander," the Admiral continued, "the defense fleet will include units from multiple species. There will be Vellani scout ships, Threx heavy cruisers, and a small human contingent." Zex-Hi almost laughed. "Humans? Admiral? What can those soft creatures do against the Void Swarm?" "The humans requested to join the mission," Kestar explained. "Their Captain Park was very insistent. They have some new weapons they want to test." Zex-Hi had met humans before. They were strange, small creatures from a young species that joined the Council only 10 years ago. They were barely 5 or 6 feet tall and had no natural armor or claws. Their skin was thin and easily damaged. Most Korthani considered them little more than clever pets. The humans came from a water-covered planet called Earth. They had primitive technology and simple weapons. Zex-Hi could not understand why the Council let them join important missions. They would probably hide behind the real fighters and take credit for the victory. "Very well, Admiral," Zex-Hi said. "I will coordinate with all arriving forces." The communication ended. Zex-Hi turned to his warriors and began preparing for battle. His soldiers checked their massive plasma cannons, and reinforced armor suits. Each Korthani carried weapons that could destroy small buildings. Their battle suits made them even stronger and harder to kill. As the hours passed, ships began arriving at the station. First came the Villani scouts, with their fast, delicate vessels. Then the Threx appeared, with their huge, slow cruisers covered in heavy weapons. Finally, a small group of human ships approached. Zexhai looked at the human vessels through the station's cameras. They were strange, box-like things that seemed almost primitive. They had odd angles and unusual weapon placements. The ships looked like they were built by people who did not understand proper military design. The human leader, Captain Minjun Park, requested permission to come aboard the station. Zexhai granted it. Curious to see these weak creatures up close, Captain Park entered the command center with 2 other humans. Zexhai was surprised by how small they were. Park barely reached Zexhai's chest. The human's skin was pale and looked fragile. He wore a simple uniform with no armor. "Commander Zexhai," Park said with a slight bow. "Thank you for allowing us to join this mission. My team is ready to assist however needed." Zexhai looked down at the tiny human. "Captain Park, your ships will stay in the rear position during the battle. Support duties only. Leave the real fighting to trained warriors." Park's face showed no anger at the dismissal. "Understood, Commander. We'll follow your orders." Zexhai noticed that Park spoke very calmly. Most species showed fear when facing the void swarm, but this human seemed almost relaxed. It was probably because humans did not truly understand the danger they faced. The sensors suddenly showed new contacts approaching. The void swarm had arrived early. Zexhai watched the main screen as dark shapes emerged from space. The enemy ships were black and seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They moved in patterns that hurt to watch, flowing like liquid metal through space. "All ships to battle positions," Zexhai commanded. "Prepare for combat." The human ships moved to the rear of the formation as ordered. Zexhai focused on positioning his Korthani warriors at the front. They would meet the swarm head-on like true fighters should. As the enemy fleet grew larger on the screens, Zexhai felt something he had not experienced in many years. Deep in his chest, a small, cold feeling began to grow. He told himself it was just excitement before battle. Korthani warriors did not feel fear. But as he watched the dark ships approach, Zexhai wondered if he truly understood what they were about to face. The first shots of the battle came from Zexhai's heavy cruiser line. Massive plasma beams lit up space as they struck the leading void swarm ships. The Korthani weapons had destroyed enemy fleets for decades. Zexhai expected to see the dark ships explode into fragments. Instead, the swarm vessels absorbed the energy and kept coming. Their black hulls seemed to drink the plasma fire and grow darker. Zexhai ordered his warriors to increase power and fire again. The second wave of shots had no effect either. "Target their engines," Zexhai commanded. "Disable their movement." The Korthani ships focused their fire on the rear sections of the swarm vessels. This time, some damage appeared. Dark fluid leaked from several enemy ships, and they slowed down. Zexhai felt a moment of satisfaction. His warriors could hurt these machines, after all. But his pride lasted only seconds. The damaged swarm ships suddenly changed direction and began firing back. Their weapons were unlike anything Zexhai had seen. Dark beams that seemed to bend space itself struck his cruisers. The first Korthani ship hit by the dark beam simply disappeared. Not destroyed or exploded. It vanished as if it had never existed. The crew of 300 warriors was gone in an instant. Zexhai stared at the empty space where his ship had been and felt ice in his blood. "Evasive maneuvers," he shouted. "Scatter formation and attack from multiple angles." His ships spread out and tried the traditional Korthani battle tactics. They had used these same methods to defeat every enemy for centuries. Each ship moved to a different position and attacked weak points in the enemy formation. The void swarm adapted in minutes. Their ships moved to counter every Korthani tactic before Zexhi's warriors could complete their attacks. It was as if the enemy could read their minds and predict every move. More dark beams lanced out across space. A second Korthani cruiser disappeared. Then a third. Zexhi watched his elite warriors vanish one by one and realized something terrible. These machines were learning from every attack. They studied Korthani tactics and found ways to counter them immediately. But the worst was yet to come. As Zexhi watched, something impossible happened to one of his damaged ships. The cruiser that had been leaking dark fluid suddenly changed course and began attacking other Korthani vessels. "What is happening?" Zexhi demanded. "Why is the Stormbreaker firing on us?" Chirp-Click checked his sensors with shaking feathers. "Commander, the ship is no longer showing Korthani life signs. The dark energy from the enemy has changed something. It's converting our vessels." Zexhi's world seemed to spin around him. The enemy was not just destroying his ships, they were stealing them. The dark beams did not merely kill. They transformed everything they touched into part of the swarm. The Stormbreaker's communication system activated. The face that appeared on screen made Zexhi's blood turn to ice. It was Commander Veltar, his oldest friend and battle companion. But Veltar's eyes were now completely black, and his voice sounded mechanical. "Resistance is meaningless," Veltar said in a hollow tone. "Join the swarm and find peace in unity." Zexhi tried to speak, but no words came. Veltar had trained with him since childhood. They had fought side by side in 20 campaigns. Now his best friend was pointing weapons at him and speaking like a machine. "Veltar, fight it," Zexhi managed to say. "Remember who you are." But the thing that had been Veltar only smiled with cold, empty eyes. The Stormbreaker opened fire on Zexhi's command ship. The shields held, but barely. Zexhi had to make the hardest decision of his military career. He ordered his gunners to fire back at his friend's ship. The battle continued around them. Villani scout ships tried their speed and agility against the swarm. The fast little vessels darted between enemy ships like dancing birds. For a moment, it seemed like their tactics might work. Then the swarm ships began moving faster than should be possible. They caught the scouts easily and converted them one by one. The Threk's heavy cruisers lasted longer. Their thick armor and massive weapons held back the enemy for almost an hour. But the swarm learned from every exchange. They found weak points in the armor and turned the Threk's ship's own weapons against them. Zexhi watched the battle display with growing horror. Red dots representing Allied ships disappeared one after another. Yellow dots showed converted vessels now fighting for the enemy. The swarm was not just winning, they were growing stronger with every ship they took. For the first time in his life, Zexhi knew real fear. Not the careful concern of a skilled warrior facing danger. This was deep, primal terror that made his hands shake and his breath come in short gasps. He was watching the unstoppable destruction of everything he believed in. The Korthani were the greatest warriors in the galaxy. They had never lost a major battle. Their tactics and weapons were perfect through centuries of refinement. But none of it mattered against an enemy that learned faster than they could adapt. Half the defense fleet was gone. Station Omega-7 would fall within hours. The 3 star systems beyond would be next. Millions of lives would be lost. And the swarm would grow even larger. Zexhi's communication system chimed with an incoming message. He expected it to be another desperate call for help or a surrender demand from the swarm. Instead, it was Captain Park's calm voice. "Commander Zexhi, requesting permission to engage the enemy." Zexhi almost laughed, but it came out as a broken sound. The humans wanted to fight? Their tiny ships would last seconds against the swarm. It would be a meaningless gesture before the end. But Zexhi had no other options left. His pride was already destroyed. His tactics had failed completely. Maybe the humans could buy a few more minutes for someone to escape. Permission granted, Captain Park, HFY said. Do whatever you can. The human ships moved forward from their rear position. HFY watched on his sensors, expecting to see them vanish as quickly as everything else. Instead, something strange happened. The human vessels did not follow any military formation HFY recognized. They moved in seemingly random patterns, sometimes rushing toward enemy ships, sometimes pulling back for no apparent reason. Their weapons fired at odd intervals, sometimes hitting empty space. But for the first time since the battle began, the Void Swarm ships hesitated. They slowed their advance and seemed to study the human attack patterns. For several minutes, no more Allied ships disappeared. HFY stared at the display screen in confusion. What were the humans doing? Their tactics made no sense at all. Yet somehow, the unstoppable swarm had paused its advance. Captain Park's voice came over the communication again. Commander, we need to coordinate with your remaining forces. The swarm adapts to logical patterns, but we might have found a weakness. HFY looked at his tactical display. He had 12 ships left out of 50. The humans had lost none of their vessels. How was that possible? What kind of weakness? HFY asked. The kind that requires us to fight like humans, Park replied. Are you willing to try something that goes against everything you've been taught? HFY thought of Veltar's empty black eyes and the converted ships hunting his people. His traditional tactics had failed completely. Maybe it was time to learn something new. Tell me what you need, he said. Captain Park's ship moved alongside HFY's command vessel. The human explained his plan through the communication system while both ships dodged dark beams from the Void Swarm. Commander, the swarm learns by reading patterns, Park said. They study how we move, how we attack, how we think. Then, they counter everything perfectly. But there's one thing they cannot predict. What is that? HFY asked. He watched his tactical display show more red dots disappearing. Chaos, Park replied. The swarm expects logical military behavior. They adapt to smart tactics and efficient strategies. But what if we stop being logical? HFY did not understand. You want us to fight stupidly? Not stupidly. Emotionally, Park explained. Humans have faced machine intelligence before, back in our home system. We learned that artificial minds have trouble with organic randomness. When we fight with our hearts instead of our heads. When we make decisions based on feelings instead of tactics, they cannot adapt fast enough. On his screen, HFY could see the human ships continuing their strange dance around the swarm vessels. Sometimes they attacked in groups. Sometimes they scattered for no reason. Sometimes they rushed toward certain death, only to turn away at the last second. It looked completely insane to HFY's trained military mind. But he had to admit it was working. The swarm ships were moving more slowly, taking time to analyze each unpredictable human action. How do we fight emotionally? HFY asked. Korthani warriors are trained to control all feelings in battle. That training is exactly the problem, Park said. Your warriors are too predictable. Because they follow perfect discipline. The swarm can read that discipline like a book. Park sent tactical data to HFY's ship. It showed detailed analysis of human encounters with artificial intelligence. The records were from conflicts in the Earth system that the Galactic Council had never heard about. We discovered that the most effective fighters against AI are not the most skilled soldiers, Park continued. They are the ones who fight to protect something they love. Fear, anger, hope, desperation. These emotions create random behavior that machines cannot predict. HFY studied the data. It showed human forces defeating superior machine fleets by using tactics that broke every rule of military science. They sent damaged ships on impossible rescue missions. They attacked when they should retreat. They protected wounded soldiers instead of completing objectives. All of it was tactically wrong. All of it had worked. "You want my warriors to abandon their training," HFY said slowly. "I want your warriors to remember why they fight," Park replied. 3 more Korthani ships disappeared while they talked. HFY was running out of time to make a decision. He could continue using traditional tactics and watch his remaining forces get destroyed. Or he could trust these strange humans and try something that went against everything he had learned. HFY opened a communication channel to his surviving ships. "All Korthani vessels. This is your commander. I am ordering you to disregard standard battle protocols." His captains responded with confusion. "Sir, what are your new orders?" HFY took a deep breath. "Fight like you are protecting your families. Fight like you are angry. Fight like you are afraid. Do not think about tactics. Follow your instincts and emotions." The silence on the communication channel lasted several seconds. Then, Captain Grixmore, of the ship Iron Fist, spoke up. "Commander, are you ordering us to fight without discipline? I am ordering you to fight like the people you used to be before military training changed you." HFY replied. "Remember your home world. Remember the people who matter to you. Fight for them, not for military protocol." HFY could hear uncertainty in his captains' voices, but they acknowledged the orders. The remaining Korthani ships began moving in new ways. Instead of perfect formations, they spread out randomly. Instead of coordinated attacks, each ship acted independently. At first, it looked like complete chaos. Korthani vessels rushed toward enemy ships without support. They fired at random targets. They broke off attacks to help damaged allies, even when it was tactically wrong. But something amazing happened. The Void Swarm ships began making mistakes. They moved to counterattacks that never came. They ignored threats that suddenly appeared from unexpected directions. For the first time, swarm vessels took damage and had to retreat. Captain Park coordinated the mixed human Korthani force through pure emotional tactics. When swarm ships threatened the station, human and Korthani vessels rushed to defend it together, not because it was strategically important, but because people lived there. When the enemy tried to convert more ships, the Allied forces attacked with desperate fury. Not because conversion was tactically bad, but because they could not bear to see friends turned into enemies. HFY found himself making decisions he had never made before. When a damaged human ship was surrounded by swarm vessels, he sent 3 of his remaining cruisers to rescue it. The rescue made no tactical sense. The human ship was not important to the overall battle. But HFY remembered Captain Park's calm voice offering help when everything seemed hopeless. He remembered the human willingness to share knowledge instead of keeping secrets. He could not watch these strange, brave creatures die alone. The rescue worked. The swarm ships had positioned themselves to counter a logical attack on military targets. They were not ready for an emotional rescue mission that ignored tactical value. "Commander," Park's voice came over the communication. "The swarm command ship is at the center of their formation. If we can damage it, we might disrupt their coordination." HFY looked at the massive vessel on his display. It was 3 times larger than his biggest ship and protected by dozens of escort vessels. A direct attack would be suicide. "What do you suggest?" he asked. "The most emotionally driven, tactically insane thing possible," Park replied. "A direct charge with everything we have left. No strategy, no plan, just pure, desperate hope." Every part of HFY's military training screamed against such an idea. It was wasteful, inefficient, and almost certain to fail. But he looked at his display screen and saw converted ships with the faces of friends now serving the enemy. He thought about the 3 star systems behind them. Billions of people who would die if the swarm was not stopped. His military training had already failed completely. Maybe it was time to fight like a person instead of like a perfect soldier. "All ships," HFY announced. "Prepare for full assault on the command vessel. We charge together, and we fight for everyone we want to protect. As the combined human Korthani force turned toward the heart of the swarm fleet, Zexhai felt something he had never experienced before. He was terrified, angry, hopeful, and determined all at the same time. For the first time in his life, he was fighting with his heart instead of his head. And somehow, that made him feel more like a true warrior than ever before. The charge toward the swarm command ship was unlike any battle Zexhai had ever experienced. Human and Korthani vessels flew side by side, their movements guided by emotion rather than military doctrine. Ships that should have maintained safe distances instead grouped together like a protective family. Zexhai watched Captain Park's vessel take the lead position. The small human ship looked fragile next to the massive Korthani cruisers, but Park flew with absolute determination. When swarm fighters attacked the formation, human ships threw themselves into harm's way to protect larger Allied vessels. The swarm's defensive pattern began to break down. Their ships moved to intercept logical attack formations that never materialized. Instead of organized assault groups, they faced individual ships, making personal choices to fight or protect or sacrifice. Zexhai's command ship shuddered as dark beams struck the hull. Damage reports flooded in from all sections. But instead of calculating survival odds and tactical advantages, he found himself thinking about his crew. These were not just military assets. They were people who trusted him to bring them home. "Commander," his weapons officer called out. "The human ship Determination is taking heavy fire. They're badly damaged." Through the viewport, Zexhai could see the small human vessel surrounded by 3 swarm fighters. Its hull was cracked, and atmosphere was leaking into space. The logical military decision was to continue toward the main target and let the damaged ship fend for itself. Instead, Zexhai heard himself order, "All weapons, target those fighters, protect our allies." The Korthani ship's massive guns turned toward the swarm fighters. The enemy vessels had positioned themselves to counter an attack on the command ship, not to defend against rescue fire. 2 fighters exploded immediately. The third tried to retreat, but human ships rushed in to finish it. Captain Park's voice came over communications. "Thank you, Commander. The determination is secure." Zexhai felt something warm in his chest. He had saved people, not because it helped win the battle, but because they mattered to him. The feeling was strange and powerful. The battle continued as they pressed closer to the command ship. Swarm vessels tried to adapt to the emotional tactics, but they could not predict what the Allied ships would do next. When humans saw Korthani warriors in danger, they attacked with desperate fury. When Korthani crews saw human ships damaged, they abandoned their positions to help. Sergeant Ji-Hae Kim's voice suddenly came over the general communication channel. She was aboard a human assault ship, preparing to board the swarm command vessel. "All crews, this is Sergeant Kim," she said. "We're going in to plant explosives manually. If anyone wants to say goodbye to family, now is the time." Zexhai listened to the human soldiers talking to their loved ones across space. They spoke of hopes and fears, of people waiting for them at home, of promises to return safely. These were not the words of perfect military machines. They were the words of people who knew they might die, but fought anyway. The assault ship reached the command vessel's docking bay. Swarm defenders tried to repel the boarding party, but they faced humans fighting with emotions the machines could not understand. The soldiers attacked not because orders told them to, but because they could not bear the thought of their friends and families facing the swarm. Zexhai coordinated the external battle while listening to reports from inside the command ship. The humans fought through corridors too narrow for proper tactics. They made decisions based on protecting wounded comrades rather than tactical efficiency. They took risks that no military manual would ever recommend. And it worked. The swarm's internal defenses were designed to counter logical boarding actions. They could not predict soldiers who charged into overwhelming odds to save a single injured person. But then, disaster struck. The converted ship Stormbreaker, still commanded by the thing that had been Veltar, appeared directly in front of Zexhi's vessel. The familiar ship opened fire at close range, punching holes through the command bridge. Sparks flew from control panels. Several crew members were thrown to the floor by the impact. Zexhi found himself face to face with his oldest friend on the main screen. Veltar, Zexhi said, his voice breaking. I know you're still in there somewhere. Fight the swarm's control. The black eyes stared back at him without recognition. Veltar no longer exists. There is only the swarm. Surrender now, and join us, willingly. Zexhi's military training said to fire all weapons and destroy the threat immediately. The Stormbreaker was badly damaged and could be eliminated easily. But looking at his friend's face, even changed as it was, Zexhi could not give the order. I remember when we were children, Zexhi said instead. You saved me from the storm lizards in the canyon. You said friends always protect each other, no matter what. For just a moment, something flickered in the black eyes. The mechanical voice hesitated. I remember. The moment of confusion gave Sergeant Kim's team the time they needed. Her voice came over communications from deep inside the command ship. Explosives are planted. All ships get clear. 30 seconds. But the Stormbreaker was still too close. If Zexhi's ship retreated, Veltar's vessel would be destroyed in the explosion. If he stayed to try to save his friend, both ships would be lost. The logical choice was obvious. One ship versus two ships. Simple, military mathematics. Instead, Zexhi made an emotional decision that no tactical computer would ever recommend. He extended the command ship's shields to cover the Stormbreaker as well, using almost all remaining power to protect the vessel that had been attacking him. What are you doing? The thing, wearing Veltar's face, asked. What you taught me, Zexhi replied. Friends protect each other, no matter what. The command ship's explosion tore through space like a miniature star. The blast wave struck both ships, but Zexhi's extended shields held just long enough. Both vessels survived. Barely. The destruction of the command ship sent waves of disruption through the swarm fleet. Without central coordination, the dark vessels began to move randomly. Many simply stopped fighting and drifted in space. On the Stormbreaker's communication screen, Veltar's eyes slowly changed from black to their normal golden color. The mechanical voice became natural again. Zexhi? Veltar said weakly. What happened? I remember darkness. And then, you, protecting me, even when I was trying to kill you. Zexhi felt tears running down his armored face. Welcome back, old friend. Captain Park's voice came over the fleet communication. All ships, the swarm fleet is retreating. We have won the battle. But Zexhi barely heard the announcement. He was looking at his friend's face, restored to normal, and thinking about what he had learned. Military tactics had failed against the swarm. Perfect discipline had been useless. Logical strategy had led only to defeat. But fighting with emotions, with love and fear, and hope and determination, had somehow been enough to win. Veltar, he said quietly, I think I finally understand what real strength looks like. His friend smiled weakly. What does it look like? Zexhi thought about the humans who had charged into impossible danger to protect people they barely knew. He thought about his own choice to save an enemy ship because friendship mattered more than tactics. It looks like being afraid but fighting anyway, he said. It looks like humans. 3 weeks after the battle, Zexhi sat in his quarters aboard Defense Station Omega-7. The station had been rebuilt and reinforced, but the scars from the Void Swarm attack were still visible on the outer hull. He was writing his official report to the Korthani High Command, trying to explain what had happened during the battle. How could he tell the greatest military minds of his people that everything they believed about warfare was wrong? How could he explain that the key to victory had been abandoning all their training and fighting like emotional creatures instead of perfect soldiers? HFY looked at the data from the battle one more time. The numbers were clear. Traditional Korthani tactics had resulted in the loss of 38 ships in the first 2 hours. Human emotional tactics had saved the remaining 12 ships and won the battle. But numbers could not explain why it worked. Numbers could not describe the moment when protecting a friend became more important than following orders. Numbers could not show how love and fear together created a strength that no machine could understand or counter. A soft chime announced that someone was requesting entry to his quarters. HFY opened the door to find Captain Park standing in the corridor. The human looked small and fragile as always, but HFY now saw something else in his calm eyes. He saw the kind of courage that only came from being terrified and choosing to act anyway. "Captain Park," HFY said. "Please, come in. I was hoping to speak with you before you left for Earth." Park entered the simply decorated quarters and took a seat across from HFY's desk. "I wanted to thank you, Commander. Your decision to trust us saved everyone on this station." HFY shook his massive head. "You saved us, Captain. You and your people showed us something we had forgotten. You reminded us why we fight. We reminded you how to fight." Park corrected gently. "The Korthani already knew why. You just needed to connect your training to your hearts." Through the viewport, HFY could see human ships preparing to depart. They would return to Earth to report on their mission. The Galactic Council had already requested that human ships be included in all future defense operations. "Captain, I have a question," HFY said. "During the battle, your people were clearly afraid. I could see it in their voices, in their actions. But they fought anyway. How do humans find courage when they are terrified?" Park was quiet for a moment, thinking. "Fear is not the opposite of courage, Commander. Fear is information. It tells us what matters most to us. When we're afraid of losing something precious, that fear can make us stronger than we ever thought possible. But Korthani military training teaches us to suppress fear. We are told it makes us weak. Fear makes you predictable if you try to eliminate it," Park explained. "But fear makes you dangerous if you embrace it and use it." The Void Swarm could predict how trained warriors would act because training creates patterns. They could not predict how people fighting for their loved ones would act because love creates chaos. HFY thought about his friend Veltar, restored to normal but still recovering from his time under swarm control. The doctors said Veltar would make a full recovery, but the experience had changed him. He talked now about the coldness of pure logic, without emotion to guide it. "My people believe that the perfect warrior feels no fear, shows no emotion, follows only tactical logic," HFY said. "You are telling me this belief is wrong." "Not wrong, Commander. Incomplete." Park leaned forward in his chair. "Logic and training are important, but they work best when they serve something larger than themselves. When your warriors fight only for tactical perfection, they become like machines. When they fight for people they love, they become something machines can never understand or defeat." HFY saved his report file and turned to face Park directly. "Captain, I have a request. I am asking the High Command to reassign me to joint operations with human forces. Would your people accept a Korthani commander who wants to learn your methods?" Park smiled, the first truly relaxed expression HFY had seen from him. "But I should warn you, fighting the human way is much harder than fighting the Korthani way." "How so?" "Because you have to care about everything and everyone around you. You have to let yourself feel fear and anger and love, and then use those feelings to make impossible decisions. You have to risk your heart as well as your life." HFY stood up and looked out at the stars where the battle had taken place. He could see the debris field where so many ships had been lost. But he could also see the construction ships rebuilding and the patrol vessels protecting the system. "I think I am ready to learn that kind of fighting," he said. Park stood as well and extended his small hand toward Zexhai. The Korthani commander looked at the gesture for a moment, then carefully shook the human's hand with his massive fingers. "There is something else I want to tell you, Captain. After the battle, I realized something important. When I was most afraid, when everything seemed hopeless, I found strength I did not know I had. The fear did not make me weak. It showed me what I was truly capable of when something important was at risk. That's the secret," Park said. "Humans are not brave because we don't feel fear. We're brave because we feel fear and act anyway. Every time we do something that scares us, we become a little bit stronger." 3 hours later, Zexhai submitted his final report to the Korthani High Command. He wrote about tactical failures and strategic mistakes. He described the Void Swarm's adaptation capabilities and their conversion weapons. He provided detailed analysis of human emotional warfare techniques. But in the conclusion, he wrote something that would change how the Korthani military thought about combat forever. "The humans are not weak, as we believed. They are the most dangerous fighters in the galaxy, because they have weaponized their own emotions. They turn fear into strength, love into fury, and desperation into victory. When faced with impossible odds, they do not calculate survival probabilities. They decide what they cannot bear to lose, and then they fight with everything they have to protect it. We have much to learn from these small, soft creatures. They have shown us that the perfect warrior is not the one who feels nothing, but the one who feels everything and fights anyway. They have taught us that true strength comes not from suppressing our emotions, but from letting our emotions show us what is worth fighting for. I request permanent assignment to joint human operations, not to command them, but to learn from them. The galaxy is dangerous, and we will face enemies that can counter our logic and tactics. When that day comes, we will need people who know how to fight with their hearts as well as their minds. We will need warriors who understand that sometimes the most tactically impossible action is the only one that can save everyone we love." 2 months later, Zexhai received orders to report to a joint task force headquarters on Luna Base. He would serve alongside human crews and learn their methods of emotional warfare. His first assignment would be training other Korthani commanders in the art of fighting with feelings instead of just tactics. As his ship departed from Korthus, heading toward the human home system, Zexhai felt afraid. He was leaving everything familiar to learn from creatures that most of his people still considered weak and strange. But he had learned something important from the battle against the Void Swarm. Fear was just information telling him that he was about to do something important. And what could be more important than learning to protect the things that mattered most? Zexhai smiled as Earth grew larger on his ship's display screen. He was about to discover just how much courage it took to fight like a human.